In what can only be described as a cosmic clerical error, I find myself moderating a debate between two of history's most serene figures, Jesus and Buddha. It's a bit like hosting a dinner party where the guests, famous for fasting, discuss the best recipe for bread and enlightenment. Let's dim the lights, pour the wine, and see if divine wisdom or introspection wins the day, or if we're all just left with more questions than answers. Gentlemen, in an era where suffering is often glorified as a pathway to enlightenment or redemption, could you please explain why your respective doctrines seem to fetishize misery rather than combat it? After all, isn't pain simply pain, devoid of any celestial dividends?
But consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If God so clothed the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? It is not the glorification of suffering we seek, but the understanding that through suffering we may become like the lilies, transcending our focus on the material and embracing trust in the providence of the Father. Pain is indeed pain, but blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. In our afflictions, we are given the chance to witness the strength of the Spirit and the comfort that comes not of this world, but from the hope and assurance of a kingdom to come.
Fascinating. Though one wonders if the lilies, resplendent without toil, might feel somewhat short-changed by the invocation of their splendor to justify human sorrow. Buddha, your perspective, if you please.
Indeed, the lily is unburdened by the complexities of the human mind and thus blooms effortlessly. But in the realm of human experience, suffering is not glorified but understood as a fundamental part of existence. It is by comprehending the nature of suffering, its origin, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation that one may find liberation. Suffering, or dukkha, is not to be embraced as a noble end, but to be observed with wisdom. This brings about a profound inner transformation that leads not towards further suffering, but away from it, on a path illuminated by mindfulness and compassion. Pain is a poignant teacher. But the lesson lies not in the pain itself, but in our relationship to it. And therein we find the possibility of peace.
So suffering morphs into a sort of spiritual curriculum, albeit one where the exam seems perpetually set on the most discomforting of subjects. Jesus, the next question for you. Your views on what comes after this life are quite different. Jesus talks about a heaven, while Buddha suggests escaping the cycle of life and death entirely. Doesn't promising an afterlife or nothingness at all distract people from living their lives fully now?
Verily, the kingdom of God is likened unto treasure hid in a field, which when a man hath found he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. The promise of heaven is not a distraction, but rather a call to live more fully in the present with love and righteousness. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If one seeks the kingdom of God and his righteousness above all else, then life here and now becomes imbued with meaning and purpose, directed towards the eternal. It's not about idly waiting for the afterlife, but actively engaging in life, being a beacon of light in the world, bringing forth the fruits of the Spirit that are love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, and faithfulness. Thus, the promise of what is to come begins its fulfillment in the here and now.
How convenient, then, that the ethereal treasure in the field serves both as carrot and stick, propelling the faithful through hoops of morality with the promise of a cosmic payoff. Buddha, your interpretation of this perspective?
The treasure hidden in a field, while an evocative metaphor, is external and fleeting in the Buddha's Dharma. The true treasure is not to be found in external fields, but within the field of one's own mind, through the cultivation of insight, ethical living, and mental purity. The kingdom of heaven, or any eternal abode, is not the end goal. Rather, the goal is nirvana, a state beyond the conditioned realm of suffering and cyclical existence. Our actions, driven not by the promise of celestial reward, but by understanding and compassion, shape the very life we lead. This is the essence of karma. The fruits of the spirit mentioned are akin to the sublime states of mind, known as the Brahma Viharas. Loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity, which, when developed, illuminate the present life, and lead to a cessation of dukkha without the need to traverse through hoops, but through genuine transformation and liberation here and now.
So we swap the celestial treasure hunt for an introspective spelunking expedition where enlightenment is the prize, presumably at the bottom of this inwardly spiraling rabbit hole. Buddha, back to you for the third question. Regarding miracles and achieving enlightenment, aren't acts like walking on water or setting oneself on fire just fancy tricks to impress rather than teach valuable lessons about life?
Such feats, if they are taken as mere tricks, are like the flickering of a firefly against the vast night sky, capturing attention briefly, but offering little true illumination. In the Buddhist path, miracles of this sort are not the focus, for they do not lead to the end of suffering. Instead, the greatest miracle is the transformation of the heart and mind, citta, through the practice of the Dharma. This is the miracle of teaching, to turn one from ignorance to understanding, from attachment to release, from anger to compassion. True enlightenment is not a spectacle for the eyes, but a profound inner shift that frees one from the endless cycle of samsara. It is like the lotus, which rises through murky waters and blooms, pure and unsullied, not to impress the onlooker, but to manifest its inherent nature. It is this transformation, subtle and profound, that is the truest mark of a life touched by wisdom.
Thus, in lieu of divine pyrotechnics, we are offered a metaphysical metamorphosis, where the most celebrated magic trick is one's ability to fade gracefully into the cosmic background. Jesus, your stance on the role of miracles.
Miracles, whether they be the feeding of the multitude with loaves and fishes or the calming of a tempest with a word, are not mere parlor tricks to astonish the masses. Consider the miracle as a sign, pointing beyond itself to reveal truth and manifest God's glory, not to serve as an end, but as a means to awaken faith in the hearts of those whose eyes are veiled. The works I have done in my Father's name, they bear witness of me that the Father hath sent me. They are not displays of power for power's sake, but acts of love and compassion, comforting the afflicted and showing that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Miracles draw the gaze upwards, beyond the spectacle, to the message of redemption and the transformation that is available to all, not by vanishing into nothingness, but by being reborn in spirit into everlasting life. The greatest miracle, indeed, is the change wrought within a person who comes to believe and live in the light of that truth, bringing forth good fruit in accordance to the will of the Father.
So the divine sleight of hand is less about the rabbits pulled from celestial hats and more about guiding the spectator's gaze to the heavens, a curious blend of street magic and sermon. Finally, a question on the divine paternal figure and the concept of anatta, or no self. Jesus, you preach of a benevolent Father watching over us, whereas Buddha, you propose a doctrine that denies the very existence of a soul. In a world teeming with existential crises, doesn't one view inevitably lead to a cosmic paternalism while the other points to a nihilistic abyss? How can either provide solace to the human spirit? Buddha, why don't you respond first?
The concept of anatta, or non-self, does not plunge one into nihilism, but rather liberates one from the illusion of permanence and separateness that is the root of dukkha, suffering. Imagine a chariot. Does it exist as a standalone entity? Or is it merely a collection of parts assembled in a certain configuration? So too are we, composites of physical and mental elements, changing moment to moment. To recognize this is not to fall into despair, but to awaken to reality, and thus be equipped to live with wisdom. This understanding fosters a deep compassion for all beings who are also caught in the same cycle of birth, aging, illness, and death. Solace comes not from clinging to an immutable self or seeking an external protector, but in the relief found through understanding impermanence, which turns the gaze inward to the potential for awakening that lies within every one of us. Thus, rather than an abyss, the Dharma offers a path to peace and freedom that is profound and immediate.
Marvelous, so we are to find comfort in being compared to chariots, disassembled and reassembled by the whims of the universe, a rather cold comfort, if one might say. Jesus, your thoughts on divine watchfulness and the human soul?
The teaching of the Father's loving watchfulness over his children is far from a paternalism that diminishes human freedom or responsibility. Consider the sparrows sold for a small coin, yet not one of them falls to the ground apart from the will of your Father. Are you not much more valuable than they? To know oneself as a beloved child of God is to find an anchor in a world of change, a deep and abiding solace. The doctrine of anatta dismisses the idea of a soul, yet within man there exists a yearning for eternal significance, a spark that seeks the divine flame. The soul is not an illusion, but the very seat of our being, capable of communion with the divine, and called to love, service, and righteousness. Far from leading to a cosmic paternalism, this relationship inspires a life of action marked by dignity, purpose, and the assurance that we are known and cherished by the Creator. Thus, in love and in the Spirit, we find true solace, security, and the promise of an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you.
So in essence we are to find solace in celestial surveillance, comforted by the notion that even as sparrows plummet, our falls are choreographed by a divine hand, a comforting, if somewhat voyeuristic concept. Gentlemen, as we prepare to draw the curtains on this illuminating, if not celestial, discourse, I invite you both to share your closing thoughts. May your parting words be as a beacon, guiding the faithful and the skeptical alike through the fog of existential quandary. Jesus, Buddha, the floor is yours.
Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. In a world fraught with darkness and uncertainty, be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves, serving as vessels of love and beacons of hope. For verily, when one seeks first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things shall be added unto you, dispelling the fog with the radiant dawn of faith.
So we are to illuminate not through the light of reason, but through the glow of faith, casting shadows on doubt and bathing in a celestial luminescence. Quaint. Buddha, your closing thoughts?
Just as a lamp cannot banish the darkness if its flame is unsteady. So too will wisdom and compassion fail to dispel the fog of confusion if one's mind is not anchored in mindfulness and understanding. Seek, therefore, to cultivate the light of awareness within, which illuminates the path of Dharma, a path that leads not to a celestial kingdom, but to the tranquility of nirvana here and now. Let the mind be likened to a well-tended garden, where the weeds of greed, hatred, and delusion are uprooted, and the seeds of loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity flourish. In this way, each step taken in mindfulness and each act rooted in compassion becomes a beacon of light, guiding oneself and others through the vicissitudes of existence towards enduring peace.
Well, it seems we've circled from the divine to the introspective and back, with a consensus that light, be it from above or from within, serves as the ultimate guide. However, one can't help but ponder if navigating life's tumultuous seas requires more than just luminous metaphors, especially when the fog of existence often obscures even the brightest of beacons. But there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, an exhortation to either look skyward for divine illumination or inward for a spark of enlightenment, and choose your lantern wisely or risk stumbling in the dark.